Hi, we're here with Gabe Pollock, who's the director of the Bop Stop in Ohio City, which is part of the nonprofit music settlement, and it's actually this area's only nonprofit music venue. Hi, Gabe. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Good. Can you tell us a little bit about the Bop Stop and how it fits into the live music scene in Cleveland?
Sure. So, the Bop Stop was privately owned for quite some time, and this is the third location. And in 2014, it started operating as a nonprofit wing of the music settlement. And we are one of, I would say, two primarily jazz clubs here in the Cleveland area. There's Nighttown on the east side and then Bop Stop.
You do a lot more than jazz as well.
That's true. I think a lot of people pigeonhole us as a jazz club, but I guess I booked the venue prioritizing original music and improvisation. So those two things, naturally jazz falls into that category, but there's plenty of those two characteristics in all genres of music. So yeah, it's a little bit more varied. But when we came online in 2014, I really wanted to not step on any other venue's toes. I thought, you have the opportunity to start a venue in Cleveland, why not add to the fabric of what the city has to offer rather than duplicate something that someone else is already doing. So I think a lot of the music and the musicians that you find at the Bop Stop would say that this place is home to them, and that prior to this venue opening, they may not have had a home quite like the Bop Stop.
Mm-hmm. So you provide a certain group of musicians with a place to play and to build their audiences.
Build their audience, and we, unlike some other venues where there's a restaurant that has music or there's that whole component of food service, musicians here really have the freedom to experiment and do what they want.
But your chocolate chip cookies are very good.
Those are pretty good. Those are good. We do have small snacks here, but not a full service restaurant.
Right.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about how the pandemic has impacted you and what you are kind of doing to keep things going here.
So
changes you've made.
Yeah, so our last show was March 12th, and we ended up canceling about 160 or 70 shows. So those all had to be, at least booked in the future, or just completely wiped off the calendar and, figure out when to revisit them. But yeah, my staff is still furloughed. Our earned revenue is down about 80%. So yeah, it's taken quite a toll on us, but we are trying to still support musicians any way that we can. We're doing that a few ways. In July, we installed live streaming equipment. So we are live streaming shows with very limited audiences. We are selling 10 tickets to our live stream. So our capacity is usually 100, so we're operating at 10% capacity. Of course, you can tune into the Facebook live streams for free over the internet, or if you really want your live music fix, you can buy a ticket and attend the streams live. So we are doing about 25 events per month, so it's a full calendar. I have programs booked through mid to late January, so try to keep the programming up. I'm also trying to find sponsors, and we did win a grant last week.
Yes.
Thank God. From the Live Music Society, we were one of 20 venues selected nationwide.
And that's a brand new group, right, that's just formed in order to help keep live music going, right?
Yeah, so Live Music Society just formed over the summer. They are going to be giving out $2 million over the next 2 years. This initial round of grants went to 20 venues, and they are specifically for venues who prioritize music as a revenue stream, who seat under 250 people, but it's open to nonprofits or for-profits. So I guess if there's anyone else that's running a venue that's listening to this, the next application process begins in January 2021.
Right.
And yeah, in September and October, we were able to do outdoor concerts as well. So that was really helpful. Of course, things are getting a little crazy as we approach these colder months and cases are on the rise again. Trying to figure out how to present music safely and to what extent we can.
Can you talk about a little bit about the Save Our Stages effort, both what's going on nationally and what local venues are doing in order to try to keep the entire scene, just bolstered enough so that it makes it through?
So Cleveland, fortunately, I guess on a local level, is well organized as a little music scene here. We have the Cleveland Music Club Coalition, and Bobstop just became a part of that this year because of the pandemic, but venues like the Happy Dog, Rock Shop, Beachland, they've rallied together to advocate for venues for the last few years. So when NIVA, the National Independent Venue Association, formed in March, it was very easy for Cleveland to just become a part of this national movement. So NIVA now has close to 3,000 members nationwide and is lobbying on a national level for federal relief. We're hoping to get a bill called the Save Our Stages Act passed. At a state level, the Cleveland Music Club Coalition, along with about 100 other venues that are part of NIVA in Ohio, are lobbying for the Save Ohio Stages Act, which would impact performance arts venues just in the state of Ohio. And then locally, we did get funding passed from the county. Part of the $4 million package. $2.7 million is reserved for nonprofits who are funded through Cuyahoga Arts and Culture, and then $1.3 million is reserved for for-profits as well as individual artists. So it's that's a start, but there's still a lot of work left to do. So.
Are you optimistic that we'll make it through? I mean, there's so much that's unknowable at this point. We don't know what trajectory the pandemic will take.
I'm hopeful. I think the venues in Cleveland have done a very good job of supporting each other. So I know we were chatting prior to this auction that's coming up, and pretty much each venue's rallied our fans to donate music memorabilia that we're going to auction off, and the proceeds will benefit the clubs. The clubs have also been really great about fundraising for the Northeast Ohio Music Relief Fund. That was another cool initiative.
Now, when does the auction actually launch publicly?
We're hoping to have it launch next week.
Date.
I know the date is.
So it'll be mid-November.
Mid-November.
So we won't be able to use that because this will air after that. How long does it last? How long does it last?
It's going to be just a few weeks. So
probably at least till the end of November.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, there should be time.
Okay, I'll skip out the part where I just spoke then.
Okay, that's
all right.
great.
So I guess I'm hopeful because of how we're supporting each other. My fingers are crossed that we get the Save Ohio Stages bill passed. I think it's up in the air what's going to happen at a federal level. Of course, today we're talking in the middle of this crazy election process, and I don't think everyone's sitting on this relief at a federal level until the results of this election are determined. So I think we were somewhat successful at the county level, hopeful at the state level. Fingers crossed for a federal level. Any of that relief comes through, we'll be in much better shape. So.
I hope there's a recognition that this is a really key part of the economy.
Yeah. And
that if you let it go, it's going to make recovery many, many, many years more difficult.
Yeah, and with venues specifically, once relief is passed, to get our calendars to where they were prior to COVID is going to be another few months. So, we're just hoping that some relief comes in before it's too late. Yes.
My little Bobstop mask.
Yeah.
It's important, everybody. And stay distance. Gabe and I are 6 feet apart here because we would like to see all our venues operating soon at full capacity. So thank you, Gabe.
No problem.
That was very helpful. And we wish you and all the other local live music venues well.
Thank you.
Well, we are back for day number 2 of the Sonic and Iconic Virtual Art Gallery. And because of COVID, we are not doing this year's gallery in an actual gallery, but we're doing it online. And it's enabled us to give you a lot more photos. At a typical gallery that we've done the last 3 or 4 years, we maybe have 300 photos on the wall. We have 1,100 to give you this week. And once again, my name is Joe Kleon. This is my dear friend.
Hi.
And your name is?
Anastasia Pantsios.
There you go. And Anastasia shot hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of shows from the late 60s, early 70s, all the way through today, but mainly through the 90s. You were still shooting a lot, weren't you?
Well, I would say from mid-70s to the late 80s was the main time I was shooting.
Okay.
By the 90s, I was doing more writing, and then I went back to it after digital photography came in.
And I started 20 years ago, and so between the two of us, we have around 50 years of concert photography, and that's what we are showcasing for you. Every photo that you see throughout the week is for sale. You'll see links in the description on the Sonic and Iconic Facebook page. You can find links on the front page of joekleon.com, and we'd love for you to purchase some photos. You'll be helping us out. You'll also help out NEO Pro Imaging, the printer that we exclusively use. Amazing printer in Cleveland. They'll be shipped directly from the printer to you, or if you don't want to pay shipping charges and you're in the area, you can go downtown Cleveland and pick them up yourself. So today we are showcasing country, and who are some of these country artists that we're going to be featuring? Anastasia, give us some of your favorite country
we're featuring both contemporary country artists that Joe has shot, the people like Jason Aldean and Luke Bryan. But in the late 80s, country had been in the doldrums and had gone very middle of the road. You had people like Olivia Newton-John who had country hits. And it was just starting to get a new influx of talent with people like George Strait and the Judds, and it was shortly before Garth Brooks broke. And I was working with an agency in New York that wanted somebody to shoot country music because nobody wanted to go. Everybody wanted to shoot all the big rock and roll acts. And I said, well, I'll do it. So for about 3 or 4 years, I went down to Nashville twice a year to shoot Country Music Fanfare and the Country Music Awards.
Did you ever do like the Grand Ole Opry or anything?
What?
Did you ever shoot the Grand Ole Opry?
The new Opry. I only shot the old Opry from outside because they had already moved into the new Opry at that point, and Opryland had been built. So it was a new era. And at this point, it was when rock acts were getting really difficult to deal with. They were all limiting photographers and making them sign contracts and get approval for this and that. And I found country music very refreshing to deal with at that point.
Was it a lot less restrictive than the rock shows?
Much less restrictive.
Wow, that's great.
They let photographers go everywhere. They let you roam around during the Country Music Awards. You had full access to the fairgrounds during a fanfare, which was a week-long event at the fairgrounds where all kinds of acts played on multiple stages. They had parties afterwards at the Opryland Hotel, and you could just walk around and walk into the rooms. And the artists were always really eager to pose and eager to talk to you in a way that rock artists at that point were becoming not very friendly.
We're going to see some iconic We're going to see some iconic photos from back in the day. Dolly Parton, George Jones, some just really iconic stuff that Anastasia had photographed. Hank Williams Jr., the Judds, Kenny Rogers, great Kenny Rogers photos, Minnie Pearl, all kinds of great stuff that Anastasia shot. And then some of my newer stuff. Also, you've got like Willie Nelson,
Waylon Jennings.
and Waylon Jennings.
Willie and Waylon,
Waylon and Willie. They were quite the pair in country back then. They were the upper echelon.
Crazy.
And then over the last 20 years, I have some of the biggest names in country like Jason Aldean and Toby Keith and Tim McGraw, Shania Twain, Rascal Flatts, Luke Bryan, Lady Antebellum, or now as they're known, Lady A's, so they don't offend people. Hank 3, that was a great show at House of Blues. So we're going to give you really a smorgasbord of 50 years of country from the classic old school to the new school. And
Yes,
again, every photo is for sale. Check out the links in the description. If you want to go to joekleon.com, you'll find links at the front page there as well. And let's get on now to our gallery of country music here at Sonic and Iconic, the Virtual Art Gallery. All right, let's remove our faces from the screen and get into people that you actually want to look at, our country performers tonight. Once again, this is round 2 on Tuesday of our Sonic and Iconic Virtual Art Gallery. We will have photos, a different set of photos every night. Tomorrow is Michael Stanley with a bunch of photos, plus part 1 of his oral history. Definitely something you want to check out if you're a Michael Stanley fan. Thursday is metal, Friday is pop, and we'll also do alternative and hip-hop on Friday. Saturday is rock, and Sunday is Cleveland Connected. So a lot of great photos, over 1,100 photos. And tonight we're focusing on country. So a bunch of country photos that have been shot by Anastasia and myself. We'll start off with this photo here of the band Perry. That was shot in 2012 at Blossom. And, we talked yesterday about some artists that we didn't like, but once we saw them live, we became fans. And I'm an old school country fan, Roy Clark and Porter Wagner and, Chet Atkins. But this was one band that I saw, that I photographed, that I actually became a fan of. They're one of my favorite, quote unquote, new country bands. Very, very dynamic performers, really good songwriters. I photographed them a few times, the band Perry. And then we go completely backward in time to just such a great, unusual photo. Boxcar Willie with somebody's babies. Where in the hell did you take that photo?
That's backstage at the Agora. I think anyone from that era would recognize that wall.
Whose babies?
I have no idea. Probably a promo guy's.
That makes it even more bizarre. He would just, some promo guy, hey, let me have your babies for a photo?
Yeah, probably. Boxcar Willie, he was kind of a weird figure because he wasn't like, a big hit maker in country. He was kind of known on TV where they promoted his albums. He was sort of kind of a character. He had this assumed personality of this, train engineer that he wore the outfit.
He played the Agora, huh?
Yeah, he played the Agora because he, like I say, he was kind of an anomaly. He was considered kind of a cultural figure more than a country figure through his promotion on TV. So he was kind of patronized by a lot of rockers who thought, oh, this is a cool offbeat kind of guy. He's not a country guy. He's more of a weird figure with a weird image.
Well, you said that he's an anomaly. You know what else is an anomaly?
What?
A record promo guy that brings babies to the Agora.
I don't remember anything about that. I honestly don't. I just don't remember why they were there.
That's kind of strange seeing babies at the Agora.
Yeah.
They probably got a contact buzz from all the pot smoke.
I don't know.
Is that Boxcar? That's the same show?
That's Boxcar on stage, yes.
And we move on to Brad Paisley.
Uh-huh.
That was from Blossom. And this shot here, it's from the 2018 show. And one of the few photos where someone has a phone, and the phone and the photo actually look kind of cool together. Usually those shots are kind of crappy, but I could have blacked the phone out and just erased it, but I liked it, so I left it in there.
Yeah.
Here we go. Charlie Daniels.
Charlie Daniels, who died recently, who was known as a great singer-songwriter, a great guitarist, a great fiddler, too. Yeah, people may remember his hit, The Devil Came Down from Georgia, where he has a fiddle contest with the devil. He wrote some really Yahoo racist kind of songs.
Just after he died, I heard some of his racist stuff, and I was blown away by it.
Yeah, but, he was a guy with kind of dual identity. He became this racist right-winger, but he wrote one of, I think, the most powerful and moving country songs. It was called Still in Saigon, and it depicted post-traumatic stress disorder of a Vietnam veteran. And it was a really beautiful song because it wasn't proselytizing, it wasn't pro-war, anti-war. It was just the war through the eyes of this person who had suffered. And, so why he became this raging right-wing racist, I have no idea.
Well,
but he did some great music.
The fact that he did become a raging right-wing racist, that means that the devil actually won in the end.
Okay.
He had to give the golden fiddle back.
Okay.
There he is playing a fiddle, not the golden one, but a really cool shot of him playing there.
Yeah.
I liked a lot of his old music too. I love that song "Uneasy Rider." That was a kind of a spoken word story hit of his.
Yeah, I remember
and the real racist thing was the sequel to that he did in the '80s. It was my god, it was crazy.
We don't need to pay attention to that. That's not what we.
Where was this show at?
Honestly, I don't remember. I think it may have been in Nashville somewhere, but I don't remember the venue.
It's fitting that we segue into David Allan Coe.
I also don't remember where these were taken. David Allan Coe is an interesting character, too, because, he's originally from this area. And he very briefly played with, I can't remember which, like a local country rock band. I think it was maybe Eli Radish. And then he went on to, to become more of a country outlaw performer. And he greatly embellished his past. He claimed that he had spent his youth in prison and, he'd been repeatedly incarcerated while, he had killed somebody. And at some point, Rolling Stone, I think it was, did a whole background check on him. And he had maybe spent like 3 months in a juvenile detention center for joyriding or something like that. But I do remember seeing him at the Agora. And I don't remember if this was at the Agora or someplace else. In the mid-'80s, and you walk in, first of all, there were like 100 Harley Davidsons parked in front of the club. And you get in there, and the place is filled with bikers. And he's up on stage, and he spends the whole show talking about how much cocaine he was doing backstage. And then he starts talking about, oh, yeah, I was in prison. I killed a man while I was in prison. And then he points at the, off stage. He says, see that guy over there? He's my road manager. He killed a man, too. And that's my dad over there. He killed somebody. He's going on about all of these people around him who supposedly had killed somebody. And in fact, nobody around David Allan Coe had ever killed anybody, including himself.
I've heard of rappers giving themselves fake street cred, but never country guys.
He was kind of the country equivalent of those rappers. He built up this reputation that was way, way, way beyond anything he'd done. And supposedly also this long hair of his was a wig.
Some photos of yours that are really, really amazing and iconic that after years of doing art galleries together, I don't remember ever seeing these before, but oh my God, I love your Dolly Parton photos.
A lot of these are, I saw them for the first time, artists that I shot on slides. I mostly never saw them other than on a slide. Some of them were published in magazines, but I never printed them. And then the last year, I just started scanning slides at home. Even the last 6 months, this was kind of my big pandemic quarantine thing that I started doing. So I was pulling out slides. I had never seen these images before.
What a treasure trove of images
and
these are for
I
me.
took a lot of color of Dolly Parton. I think these shows were at Blossom. One of them, I know was at Music Hall, one of them. And she was the perfect shining example of how country performers were so much more open than rock performers, because I remember seeing her at Music Hall, and she was really getting big at the time. And also, I think she did the same thing at Blossom, where she would tell the crowd, after the show, I'm going to have a table at the side of the stage. We'll be selling my merch. I'll be signing autographs.
I've seen bands do that at Peabody's. I wouldn't imagine that she would do it. Wow.
She did it. I remember seeing her set up in the lobby of Music Hall, and then she did a meet and greet at Blossom, where, a lot of them say, oh, we're just going to run the guy through there. No pictures, no autographs. She was there for like an hour and a half after the show, talking to every person, signing anything they wanted signed. And that was the point where she was really, really, really big, too. And her whole attitude was, you know what? If I talk to these people, they're going to be my fans for life. And back at the day, in the 70s and 80s, that's the attitude country fans had. They had the attitude that, well, I may not have chart hits forever, but if I'm nice to these people, next year when I'm at the county fair, they're going to be there. And so they were very, very aware of how to treat fans. And Dolly was definitely at the top of the list. She's like an amazing person as well as an amazing performer.
It's great that she's Miley Cyrus's godmother.
Yeah,
There's some really good videos of them performing together online.
Yeah.
When I was very young, 8 months or so before I discovered Kiss and Rush, and first grade maybe, I was into a lot of country stuff because that's what my family members listened to. Porter Wagoner, Dolly Parton were a huge duo together before she went out on her own.
Yeah,
they did lots of albums together.
Yeah.
And I remember having some Porter.
That was pretty much what kickstarted her career.
Yeah, I had some of those Porter and Dolly albums,
Yeah.
and I've always been a big Porter Wagoner fan.
Yeah.
But man, amazing Dolly Parton stuff.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. In our alphabetical order, we move next to a very young Dwight Yoakam. Wow, he looks like he's about 13.
Well, no, that was actually, I don't know, that may have been taken to Nashville too, because during that whole era, I was in the late 80s. I was going down to Nashville twice a year to shoot Country Music Fanfare and the Country Music Awards, because no one else working for my agency wanted to. And at the time, in addition to a lot of rising stars like the Judds were just getting popular, and George Strait and people like that, there was a whole group of kind of anomalies that at that point were kind of dabbling in country, most of whom left country within a few years because, you started to see the muscular-chested Stetson wearing hunks performing, and it started to go into that whole modern country thing, about the hot honey with the cut off jeans and the ice cold beer. So you had people like Lyle Lovett, you had people like Steve Earle, you had Roseanne Cash, who went into more of a singer-songwriter thing, Katie Lang, and Dwight Yoakam was one of those performers. He actually was doing what they called the Bakersfield sound, which is like the Buck Owens country, California country sound, that was more of kind of almost like a roots rock sound. And he developed an audience outside country shortly after this, and to this day he's considered kind of a beloved figure in the alternative Americana scene.
Very cool.
Yeah.
George Jones. Wow, where was
Jones,
that?
I think that was a Country Music Fanfare.
Wow, okay.
All of the big country artists had their fan clubs there. That was at the Country Music Awards. And their fans would gather. Many of the artists had picnics for their fans, and everybody played. It was always a great occasion. You saw both country greats like George Jones and up-and-coming people trying to get an audience.
And as we go from George to George Strait.
George Strait was starting to be one of the biggest stars of that era. He was out of Texas, and he did very mainstream country with just a very traditional tenor voice, and people just loved him. And he kind of plowed the ground for people like a Garth Brooks and all the people that came after him.
And we move on to Hank 3. That was taken 2018 at House of Blues. I really enjoyed that show. He performs just for such a long time and does a different variety of music, and he's really a great performer. And then we go to from Hank 3 to Hank 2.
Hank 2, and he had a very interesting career. He became kind of an icon on the outlaw, biker country scene, because that was the kind of attitude he adopted. He had a museum in Nashville for a while. It was called the Family Tradition, where he paid tribute to his father, the great Hank I, and the Family Tradition, though, it was a kind of a disconcerting museum because it was sponsored by, I hope I'm getting the liquor right, Jim Beam, I think. And their slogan was, "It's a family tradition." Well, if you know anything about what happened to Hank I, who died in the backseat of a limousine on the way to a show in Canton, Ohio in the early 50s because he basically drank himself to death. That was kind of weird. And Hank Jr., Hank II, was another artist who embraced the whole racism of country. If you go back and listen to his hit from the late 80s, "If the South Would Have Won," and it paints this paradise of what the United States would be like if the South would have won the Civil War.
Then we move on to Jason Aldean. I photographed him 4 or 5 times over the years at Blossom. And the reason I keep coming back to photograph him, number one, his fans are the craziest country fans ever. So after my 3 songs, I'll take half an hour to leave and just kind of walk around and watch people. And his fans are the craziest of any of the country artists. Mm-hmm. And another reason I photograph him all the time is because his shows are always different, kind of like Dave Matthews. I can shoot Dave Matthews year after year after year, and the shows are always different. Completely different light show, different stage show, different song selection. Everything is completely different. Other bands like Alice Cooper have been doing the same tour for like 10 or 12 years. Mm-hmm. So it's cool to shoot, and I sell a lot of his photos as well. So I've always been back to Blossom to shoot him every time he's come to town.
Waylon Jennings and Jesse Coulter, one of the great couples of country music. And I was actually a fan of Jesse Coulter before Waylon. She had that hit, I'm Not Lisa. And the two of them performed together. And I don't remember where this was taken. This may have also been in Nashville, I'm not sure. But, you know, their romance was famous.
I'm really jealous that you got to photograph this next performer, Johnny Cash.
Johnny Cash.
Where was that?
That was also at the Country Music Awards.
I saw him at the front row probably back in the mid to late 80s. I took my
Yeah,
mom to see
yeah.
him at the front row with the Carter sisters.
And that was another completely amazing performance.
Oh my God, I can only imagine.
So significant in the history of country and rock and roll.
Oh yeah, just in the history of music. Can we move into the Judds?
Then the Judds, a mom and daughter combo who started to get big in the late 80s. And their vocals were incredible together. And they were also an interesting dynamic because there was a lot of mother and daughter tension there. Naomi, the mother, was very, very driven and professional oriented. And Winona, the daughter, who just had an incredible voice, was very shy. I remember seeing her they had a huge reception at the Opryland Hotel, and everybody was mingling in the lobby. And I saw her crouched down behind a potted plant, trying to avoid people's attention. And I looked, and she kind of waved shyly, and I waved back and just walked on. But she was very unsure of herself in her early days. She also went through some weight problems, which, you know, when you're in the public eye, you get a lot of flack for that.
Yeah.
Which is too bad. But, you know, there was no denying that they had magic together on stage.
Keith Urban, that's from
Yeah.
2018 at Blossom.
Yeah.
Another guy that I really hadn't heard much of his music and didn't really know much about. Didn't become a super fan after seeing him live, but I certainly developed a lot of respect for him and his music. I was impressed. Good stuff. And man, he's got a pretty rabid fan base.
Yes, he does.
Then we move on to Kenny Rogers before plastic surgery.
Kenny Rogers, I think that was probably also taken in Nashville. He's probably doing an interview with one of the local disc jockeys, I'm guessing. And I had an interesting incident just a couple of years ago when I got an email from a publicist about something he was doing, a new album or compilation or something, and it was accompanied by a JPEG. I looked at the JPEG, did not recognize the artist, and I actually wrote back, I think you sent the wrong JPEG. And I didn't realize that plastic surgery had changed him so totally he was unrecognizable. And this publicist got really snippy about it.
So it was a plastic surgery picture, and you didn't even think it was Kenny.
It didn't look like him.
That is so
Didn't
funny.
look
Do you still
like
have
him.
it?
Probably.
I'd love to see that. Then we move on to Chris Christopherson. Where was that?
That, I think, was also the Country Music Awards,
Oh, okay.
which he hosted back in the late 80s. And, you know, he was also one of those iconic figures. He performed a lot with the Country Outlaw group with Waylon and Willie and Merle and those people.
He did a lot of movies back then, too, didn't he?
Oh, he was
Yeah.
he was had a very active career as an actor as well, and a songwriter. I mean, he was multi-talented.
Very cool. Then we move on to Lady Antebellum, back when they were Antebellum. That's from Blossom. That's from 2015. And then one of my favorite entire band silhouette shots, that was at the very beginning of the show before they started the first song. And I remember taking that shot and then pulling my camera away from my face and looking at the preview screen and seeing that photo. That was like the third photo that I took as they were coming out on stage. And I thought, if nothing else comes out good for this show, I got this one kick-ass photo. So
That's great.
I was really at ease through the rest of the show, and it helped me get a better set of photos because I just already had a good photo, so I didn't care.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a fun show to shoot.
Yeah.
And I went back and shot them a couple other times. Move on to Leanne Rimes. This was a show in Canton, Ohio in 2019. A local singer-songwriter who was really good by the name of Marina Straw. She opened up for her. And I went down and shot both artists, and it was a really fun show. And man, Leanne still brings it. She was again, I'm never really a fan or didn't know much about her music back in the day. I was, too busy smoking pot and listening to Black Sabbath. But I really liked her music, and I've listened to some of it since then on Spotify. And I really have become a fan. Not a huge fan, but she was good. Little Big Town, don't really remember much about that show. That was a soundboard shoot. So I was able to zoom in and get that shot of them singing. And now we move on to someone I loved.
Loretta Lynn, and
I
that-
had photos or 45s as a kid of Loretta Lynn.
And that was at the Country Music Awards. She was one of the groundbreaking female performers in country back in the day when country was a man's music. You had an occasional performer like Kitty Wells, but there just weren't that many. And she started performing songs that really expressed a frank view of life from the viewpoint of a woman, which was incredibly unusual at the time. You know, she wrote about divorce. She sang about divorce. She sang about, you know, getting pregnant and always having a baby on the way, and what a struggle that was. And she really paved the way for other performers such as Dolly Parton, when she was out there kind of doing it almost on her own in a world that was not very open to women performers.
I remember years ago reading a series of articles on iconic female performers, and they did an article on her and just talked about how she brought a lot of women into the genre because of the topic matter and that she was a singer, and how, like you said, how she paved the way for a lot of people.
Yeah, and people could really relate to her. Some woman living in the trailer parks going, "Oh my God, she's singing about my life."
Yeah.
And
we go to this next picture with Anne Murray, and that's a special picture for me because my mom loved Anne Murray when I was a kid, so I had probably listened to a lot of her records back in the day.
Yeah.
And I've always just been a fan of her voice, and that's really a great picture of the two of them. They toured together, or how were they together?
That was the Country Music
Awards.
Awards.
Oh, the Country Music Awards. Okay, that's right.
They often had special duet performances there, and that was one of them.
They never did a song or recorded anything
I
together,
don't think
did they?
so, no.
Very, very cool. Move on to Luke Bryan. That was from 2014.
Did anyone die at this show?
I don't think so. I think there might have still been a few corpses in the woods from the Jason Aldean show the week before, but I'm not sure about Luke Bryan. Lyle Lovett, that's an interesting photo.
Yeah, Lyle Lovett was one of those performers who came into country music in the late 80s and rapidly left because he was too offbeat for the country market, and developed more of a fan base among the Americana, alt country, the kind of performers that play the beachland. And an interesting side note is that he was also the favorite performer of plain dealer rock music writer Jane Scott.
Ah,
She never missed a show that he did.
wow.
And shortly before she died, the last performer she saw was Lyle Lovett, and she was not really able to go to shows at that much. She was almost 90, and they actually brought her to sound check.
Aw,
And he
that's
did like a
awesome.
special private show for her. So he's a guy with a big heart.
Wow,
too.
that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Merle Haggard, did you shoot this show? This was one of the Music Masters. I think it was
Yeah.
is it the Chuck Berry one?
I don't remember.
I think this might be the first time where we have a photo of each of us from the same show. I think
Yeah.
one of these is yours and one of these is mine.
Yeah, I think maybe. I'm not sure.
I think that one is yours.
I'm not sure.
I'm pretty sure. I
Yeah.
don't know. We'll have to look at that, but that would be
Yeah.
interesting because I didn't
Yeah.
know you back then, really.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
we shot the same show together.
Yeah.
Minnie Pearl without the hat and the price tag. Tell me
No,
about
but
that
she
one.
was dressing up for everybody. The Country Music Awards, everybody wore their finery. So she wasn't going to show up there as the comedian with the price tags hanging off her hat. She was going to come out elegant, and she did.
Did she do a lot of recordings back then? Was she a pretty
No,
prolific
by this
artist?
point, she was kind of one of the legacy artists. She performed with the Opry, but she wasn't touring a lot, and she wasn't a big star at this point, except in the country market where, everybody knew who she was.
Sure.
At
Well,
that
she had
point-
such a huge TV
And
presence
at that
that people
point,
knew who
country
she was.
music was still more of a legacy music where people had lifetime careers. You didn't have all these hot hunk flash in the pans.
Yeah.
So
They had a longer shelf life.
yeah, they had a much longer shelf life then.
Miranda Lambert, that's a nice
Miranda
picture.
Lambert, one of the sort of more modern country singers who kind of, I think, bridged alt country and traditional country. And I shot this downtown at the Empire.
Nice.
Or not the Empire, the Odeon.
Oh, the
excuse me,
Odeon, okay.
Odeon, yeah, the Odeon.
That's a kind of a weird booking there.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a weird booking, but, like I said, she did cross over a little bit into more of a rock audience.
Do you have any shots from the Empire Club?
Yeah, oh,
Oh
lots.
God, I love that place.
I photographed constantly.
I went to so many shows there. Randy Travis, that's a really great shot. That's so crisp and clean, and the lights are so nice. That's a really stunning shot.
Yeah, and Randy Travis was a guy who sort of, I think, his big breakout career really preceded all the hunks in cowboy hats. And he had more of a low-key, almost traditional feel to his music, harking back to some of the guys from, the 40s and 50s. That's from the Country Music Awards. You can tell he's dressed up. But he was, just a very straightforward, very deeply honest performer.
And we move on to a show from Blossom that I shot in 2013, Rascal Flatts. I don't remember anything about their music at all.
Generic. There's a lot of generic country performers.
Yeah, this
today.
was one of the more generic ones. Somebody that I'm not familiar with, Ray Price.
Ray Price, who was a country songwriter as well as had several hits and was really kind of on the cusp of that traditional era and that kind of middle of the road. Some people called it countrypolitan when the Nashville sound became very polished. But he had roots in both of those, harking back to, the Ernest Tubbs and those people, and then crossing over into the modern country of the 60s where, you had the much more mainstream sound.
Interesting.
Yeah. And that was Ricky Skaggs and his wife, whose name escapes me. She was a country artist, too.
I never knew that.
He came out of the bluegrass scene, actually. He was known as a bluegrass picker and then went more mainstream in the late 80s. His band was doing a little more mainstream country. You saw in the late 80s also, it was a very diverse era for country. You saw a lot of people coming out of the bluegrass scene and bringing a little bit of that influence into country music, and he was one of them.
And he was one that once he came out in the 80s, out of the bluegrass, that was when he had his first hits and really became known.
Correct, yeah, because bluegrass was a very kind of insular scene. And that is Roger Miller, who was another singer-songwriter and country singer that bridged the kind of traditional era and more of the mainstream era. And by the time I shot him, this was the Country Music Awards, he was kind of a legacy artist at that point. He wasn't hot news, but that was still when country was paying its respects to the people that built country into what it was.
Oh, and shooting those legacy artists just had to be great.
Yeah.
Great fun, just to watch them perform and to shoot them.
Yeah.
And we move on to Shania Twain. That is from 2018. That's from The Q.
Yes, obviously not a traditional country artist.
No, not at all. Interesting show. Tim Mcgraw, that's from Blossom. That's one of my favorite country photos, just with the duality of him in person and then larger than life on the back screen there. That was on the cover of the Alliance Daily newspaper when I did my Space Rock gallery. They did a front page thing on their entertainment section, and that was the photo. Then we continue on with Toby Keith. That's from the cover of Friday Magazine. Made it over to the Plain Dealer, and that was from 2015 at Blossom, and that's also from that same show. And then we head back in the time machine to one of the old school guys I love, Mr. Waylon Jennings.
Yeah, Waylon Jennings, along with a number of other performers such as Merle Haggard and Willie Nelson and Tom Paul Glazier, were considered the founding fathers of what was called the outlaw country movement in the what had been the mid-70s.
I was going to say mid-70s, yeah.
Mid-70s, at a time when country music had become very bland and mainstream, very middle of the road. And they set themselves up in opposition to this, the slick Nashville sound with the strings. They were raw. They sang about, wild times and tough living on the road, and cheating and drinking and brawling and doing outlaw stuff.
Now, before, kind of like Porter and Dolly, before Waylon and Willie had successful solo careers, didn't they do a whole bunch of albums together as Waylon and Willie?
I wouldn't say so much. I mean, with Dolly and Porter, that was the beginning of Dolly's career. That was what launched it. These guys were known on their own.
Oh, because
And it was a fluid group of people. I mean, you saw people that were sort of, that were part of the scene, like a Johnny Cash was sort of considered outlaw country. David Allan Coe, whom we saw earlier.
Maybe they did an album or a song around when
did-
I was really younger, because I remember
they
a
did
lot
do-
of Waylon and Willie together when I was
They
younger.
did do some stuff, and the Outlaws had an album together.
Oh, okay.
That was a huge album, one of the biggest selling country albums, and so they were known as a collective entity. But they had very active solo career. And Willie's solo career goes back to like the early '60s as a songwriter. I mean, he's been big that long.
And then we moved to Waylon and Jesse.
Waylon and Jesse again. Waylon's got that classic guitar that he always plays.
And speaking of Waylon and
Waylon
Willie,
and Willie,
there
they are together. And they did perform together a lot, but they also, both of them were known as solo artists. And then we have Willie on his own.
That's a great picture.
This was more when he had evolved into his hippie era, which he's still in.
It's hard to escape from once you fall into that era,
Yeah.
Where do you go from there?
But Willie has really maintained a fan base. He's done a lot of good. He was the founder of Farm Aid in the 80s, which helped family farms that were struggling, and brought a lot of performers together. He has he has a respected fan base among rock and roll performers too.
Great shots.
Yeah,
Just such an iconic performer. Man, oh man.
Yeah, he is.
Where were most of these taken at? Or was it all the same show?
Blossom was one of them. I think.
Where was the Waylon and Willie show at?
Oh, I wish I knew. That was probably in Nashville.
Oh, okay.
And then there's one shot there that was taken at the Country Music Awards.
And that ends off our showcase of country music. Thanks for hanging out. This is Sonic and Iconic, a weeks-long virtual art gallery, all on the Sonic and Iconic Facebook page, featuring over 1,100 photos spanning 50 years of concert photography. Please pick up some photos. Links to purchase the photos are in the description here on the Facebook page. You can also find them at joecleon.com. Yesterday's show on Classic Superstars is still available online. You can find that on the Sonic and Iconic Facebook page and also over at my website, joecleon.com. Be sure to share these links with your friends. And concert photos make great Christmas gifts. Don't bother going to the mall or infecting yourself out in public. Stay home, find some concert photos for people you love, and you'll not only help out our local businesses, but you'll also help out NEO Pro Imaging that is printing and shipping the photos. So if you buy one photo, you basically help out 2 local businesses. So you can't beat that. And we'll be back tomorrow with a night of Michael Stanley, and I'm really looking forward to this. From his beginning, 68, right? 69? 70?
I don't think we go back that far. I mean, the Michael Stanley Band started in 74.
When did you start shooting them?
74.
74, okay.
Yeah, 74.
'Cause I think the Silk album was a few years
Yeah,
before
he
that.
did Silk and he had those solo albums, but I wasn't really following him then. He didn't perform that much around here then. It really wasn't until the Michael Stanley Band started that he really got out there.
I wasn't sure if you were with it back then or not.
No,
But from 74 up and through last year, we were going to have over 100 photos from throughout his career. And we're going to broadcast for the very first time part 1 of Michael Stanley's oral history. It was recorded at my art gallery, Decade of Decibels, Space Rock, next to the Beachland Ballroom back in 2013. It's hosted by legendary radio guy and band manager David Spiro. And it's just really a fun hour and a half of Michael and David going through all of the MSB albums. From the beginning to the end of MSB, and it's really a great oral history. It's going to become part of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's library and archives, and we will live stream that for the very first time right after our photo slideshow tomorrow. So if you know Michael Stanley fans, tell them to tune in tomorrow, 8 p.m., right here at Sonic and Iconic on Facebook, and we will get into a night of Michael Stanley. Thanks for hanging out with us. We will see you tomorrow.